Um, I'm going to pretty much cover pretty much all the data sets in C2VSim. So there are too many slides. Ali, please let me know if I'm running out of time. And as Ali and John mentioned, there will be follow-up presentations later today, Tuesday and Wednesday, to talk more on details in some of those data items. So I just want to start basically for our model development process. What we have done so far is basically in the last couple of years, we've been collecting data and analyzing the data and processing data to get the C2VSim model ready. In that perspective, first, we collect the data sets for IDC, and then basically we put all that information into IDC, and we've been calibrating and updating IDC for the last maybe 6 months. We've been working with Davis Engineering, SSPA, and DWR to get IDC ready. And as John mentioned right now, I think we wrap up IDC. And in the meantime, in a parallel process, we've been working on IWFM part of the model, developing data sets and getting the model ready. So right now, we combine both of the models together, and they're running together. And in the last couple of months, we've been working again with SSPA and with Davis Engineering and with DWR to compare some of the data sets in our model with the local models, some of the agricultural water management plans, and also based on that information, we have been adjusting our IDC as needed. Right now, we are working on the calibration of the model. Basically, we are going to calibrate the water budgets first, and then groundwater heads, and then groundwater trends, and eventually that will be followed up with calibration of the stream flow and stream aquifer interaction. And then eventually there's going to be sensitivity analysis, and we'll prepare documentation. And then finally, the results will be presented in the next few months. So in this perspective, I just want to mention about one thing. So while we are preparing the data files and preparing the C2VSim model, we are also working on the SVSim model as well. So SVSim is the Sacramento Valley simulation model that covers the Sacramento Valley. So the data development process for these two models are going in parallel. We just want to make sure we use the same data sets in both of the models. And also we want to make sure the data sets, as well as data sets, the results of the models are similar and within the same range too. So in that perspective, we've been working collaboratively with many different consulting companies and DWR. Many folks, as John mentioned, from DWR, Woodard & Curran, SSPA, Davis Engineering, Timothy J. Durbin, and David Force Consulting Engineers has been working together to get this model sets together and calibrated. So the model basically covers the whole Central Valley. It covers the Bulletin 118 groundwater basins, which are the majority of them are Sacramento Valley groundwater basin and the San Joaquin Valley groundwater basin, and a few of the Bay Delta groundwater basins such as Suisun, Fairfield, Ignacia Valley, Clayton, and Pittsburgh Plain. The model grid, the criteria for developing model grid was basically we try to follow the groundwater basin boundaries. Besides that, we want to make sure we cover the major streams, conveyance facilities, and canals in the model area as well. Besides that, we want to make sure we cover pretty much all the faults. You can see the Reading fault over here and some other faults throughout the model area. And also there were some hydrogeologic and hydrologic parameters that we want to make sure that are covered in the model grid. In that perspective, we end up having more than 30,000 nodes, around 32,500 elements. The average element size is around 0.6 square mile. The size of the element is around 0.5 mile around the streams, and it becomes 1.5 mile as you go away from the streams. The model covers around 20,700 square miles. There are more than 4,600 stream nodes with 110 stream reaches. As John mentioned, the model has 4 stratigraphic layers. There are 21 subregions that represents the DSAs. We have small watersheds in the order of around 1,033. For the calibration of the model, we are using a little more than 1,900 wells and their historic records. For the stream gauges, we are using around 68 stream gauges. The hydrologic period for the model is from 1922 to 2015, and we believe that this is going to provide a really good hydrologic period for baseline analysis as well. And then the calibration period is going to be from 1973 to 2015, and the model is running in monthly time step right now. For the stream configuration, as I mentioned earlier, we have around 110 stream reaches and more than 4,600 stream nodes. that represents basically major streams, the tributaries, some of the major canals, and also some of the bypasses, especially in Sacramento Valley and some in the San Joaquin Valley as well. The stream flows, the historic stream flows in the model are developed from 1922 all the way to 2015, and the information came from different various data sources such as USGS, DWR, CalCIM3 model, the old C2VSim and CWGSM model, US Army Corps, and we also use sometimes statistical correlation analysis for the stream reaches or inflows that we didn't have historic data, or if we need to fill up any of the gap in the historic data. Stream rating tables and invert elevations. So we work with David Force Engineering on that perspective. David Force Engineering collected information from the DWR Central Valley Floodplain and Delineation HEC-RES model. In that perspective, we lay that model with the C2VSim model, and basically all the orange and red areas over here you see in the model area are covered in the CVFAT model. So that ends up being around more than 1,300 stream nodes in Sacramento Valley, and more than 1,000 nodes in San Joaquin Valley that covers the C2VSim stream nodes. The information from the CVFAT model basically was transformed into C2VSim, and that ended up being our channel invert elevations and also dead flow rating curves in the model. And for the dead flow rating curves, I believe they used the 1997 flow event for Sacramento Valley for the rating tables, and 1956 flood event for the San Joaquin River Basin, again for the rating tables. Stream bed conductance. The stream bed conductance in the model is basically representing the layer 1 vertical hydraulic conductivity of the model. So later tomorrow, Linda is going to talk about the texture analysis that she and team worked on for the Sacramento Valley and San Joaquin Valley as well. So we basically took the layer 1 vertical K, and we used that information as a starting point in the model for the stream bed conductance values. Next item is surface water diversions and bypasses. Again, right after me, Charlie and Sarah are going to talk about this in more detail. Basically, the short summary over here is, as John mentioned, we try to match the CalCIM3 demand unit structure in the C2VSim model. Basically, in Sacramento Valley, we pretty much take the historic CalCIM3 data and CalCIM3 demand units, and we map them to C2VSim. Also, pretty much all the spills in this CalCIM3 model are now also being represented in the C2VSim as well. In the San Joaquin River Basin, we took the CalCIM3 structure, but we didn't have historic data. So Charlie, Sarah, and a couple of other folks worked on the time series data to develop the time series data dating back all the way to 1922. And in the Tulare Basin, there was pretty much no CalCIM3 structure. So we tried to go back to the water districts or agricultural or urban water districts, and we tried to either represent them or we combined them together to define the demand units in that area. And again, we had to collect the historic data to make up the data all the way from 1922 to 2015. As for the surface water drainage, so basically we work with the USGS topography maps and watershed boundary data sets to be able to route the runoff from precipitation and the return flow from the applied water to specified stream nodes. As you can see over here, we pretty much use 12-digit hydrologic units throughout the model area to be able to route that water. And the black dust over here basically shows the location of the flow, and then in the background, the small area shows the watersheds that we represent in the model. So basically, all that water is being routed to some specified stream node, and during this process, we had to do some local adjustments to make sure some of the bypasses or floodways or some of the convey systems are represented, and then we correct some of the information with some other factors as well. So next item in the presentation is the model hydrology, the precipitation or the rainfall. We use the PRISM data set to define the precipitation in the model. PRISM provides precipitation data in 4-kilometer discretization all the way to early 1900s. So we use that information on a monthly basis, and we define the precipitation in the model on an element level. So the data set provides both the spatial and temporal distribution. So it was very good to have this information ready to be incorporated in the model easily. And also the precipitation data was mapped, not only the elements, but also the small watersheds on the foothills as well. Land use, again, I'm just going to stay on the surface. Tyler later on Wednesday is going to give a presentation, more detailed presentation on this one. So basically, I just want to talk about the data sources we use for land use. We use DWR land use surveys all the way starting from 1976 to 2015. Right before we wrap up our land use work, DWR came up with the 2014 statewide land use data, so we use that information as well. We used the digitized quads from 1960s. There was some information from Thermopal farms from 1988 to 2015. And then there were decadal estimates that came from all the way from 1922 to 2015 to give us some special coverage. Besides that, we used the California Department of Fish and Wildlife's refuge coverage from 1927. Kern County has land use data from 1987 to 2015, and also U.S. Department of Agriculture's cropscape data set was used from 2007 for 2015. As you can see here, we had some challenges with having a special coverage from earlier than 1970s. We only had the 1960 quad map land use coverage, and also and the next data set from that point on was 1976 land use for Sacramento and San Joaquin Delta only. So that was a challenge, and Tyler is going to dive in more details how we deal with these challenges and give his presentation on Wednesday. As for the evapotransportation, we look into different data sources. So we start with the existing data sets in C2VSim, and then there were other data sets available from DWR in the different models that are being used, such as CalCimita and CalIPE model. And also we have some local data available to look into as well. So after looking at all these data sets, we decided to use CalCimita data sets to define the potential ET in the model. But while we are doing that, we figure out that CalCimita doesn't have the ET values for the non-irrigation period. So for that perspective, we fill up the gaps for the non-irrigation period from existing C2VSim data. So we put all that information, and we ran our IDC and IWFM models together, and we simulated the actual ET, and we had information for the statewide for 2014 and 2011 for the actual ET in the model, and the comparison came out very close, and we were happy. We were very happy with the results. Next item is the soil data. Again, Byron and Dominic is going to dive into details later in their presentations. I just want to mention that we initially get our soil data from USDA's Surgo and SASCO databases, and we use IWFM Soil Data Builder tool to be able to define all the soil parameters in the model, which are basically saturated hydraulic conductivity, porosity, pore size distribution index, field capacity, and the wilting point. And the map over here basically shows the initial spatial distribution of the soil conductivity in feet per day for the whole model area. Urban water use, again, this is another collaboration between DWR and many other folks. So for urban water use, we use different data sets. For the urban water demand, the available data was from California water plants, DAU county level urban water demand data. The data covers from 1999 to 2002 and then 2010 time period. The data after 2010 was not available at this point. At that point that we developed data sets, when they become available, we'll incorporate those data sets into model as well. As for the urban population, we use any data available from US Census Bureau at county and major municipality level. And then we extend this information all the way to 1922 to cover the whole time period. And then we re-aggregate this data to DAE county level to be consistent with our demand data. As for the per capita water use, what we did is basically we took the urban water demand data from California Water Plan and then the population data from US Census Bureau data, and then basically we calculate the per capita water use as demand divided by the population for the time period of 1999 to 2000 time period. And then we extend this information to 2015 using the 2010 averages. And then going back to 1922, we use the averages for 1999. Basically, we use the per capita water use constant going back all the way to 1922, but the population data basically dictates how much water has been used historically. And the indoor and the outdoor water use in the model is basically the same assumption has been used for all the years. We look at the minimum water use within the year. We assume that water is the indoor water use, and then we kept that indoor water use constant throughout the year, and the remaining water became outdoor water use. 5 minutes, okay. Small watersheds. Basically, again, we use the USGS topography maps and watershed boundary data sets to define the 1,033 small watersheds in the model area. All the way from north to south, we define those small watersheds. These small watersheds basically moves the water from the foothills into the model area, either in the form of base flow of specified groundwater nodes, or seepage in the pathway of these small watersheds, or runoff to a specified stream nodes as they reach to streams. Geology and hydrology, the model has 4 layers, as John mentioned. The layer 1 in the model basically represents the top unconfined layer in the model. We pretty much follow the existing C2VSim information for layer 1, and we update it as necessary in this update of the model. Layer 2 basically represents the majority pumping layer in most of the model area. In Sacramento Valley, it's basically second layer, but in the San Joaquin and Tulare basins, it might be the first confined layer in the areas where we have Corcoran clay. We define layer 3 as the bottom of fresh water. So bottom of the layer 3 represents the bottom of fresh water in the model, and also layer 4 represents the bottom of continental deposits in the model. And this is a new layer we added in C2VSim that wasn't there in the previous version. So if you are going to go through the layers quickly, basically, ground surface elevation in the model is defined from USGS national elevation data sets from 10-meter DEMs. Right underneath that one, we define layer 1. Basically, bottom of layer 1 is either defined by bottom of Corcoran clay in San Joaquin and Tulare basins, or by C2VSim coast grid model in the model. And then the thickness of the layer 1 ranges from all the way from 50 feet to 900 feet. And as you see, as we go towards the San Joaquin Valley and Tulare Basin, they get a little bit thicker. The Corcoran clay represents the confined clay layers in the San Joaquin and Tulare basins. We use the information available from USGS to delineate Corcoran clay in the model. And the thickness of the Corcoran clay ranges all the way from 10 feet to 250 feet in the model. Layer 2 represents majority of the pumping, and then again we try to match the C2VSim bottom of layer 2 for most of the areas, and the thickness ranges from 50 feet to 1,300 feet depending on the location. Model layer 3, again, bottom of layer 3 represents the bottom of fresh water, so we have new information available for that delineation. In the Sacramento Valley, we use the base of freshwater developed by Steven Springhorn by the North Central Regional Office while he was in the North Central Regional Office. And then we also use some information from Williamson and Bergstresser to define the base of freshwater in Sacramento Valley. For the San Joaquin Valley, again, DWR South Central Regional Office developed a base of freshwater map, so we use that information and then we fill in the gaps from Williamson 1989. The thickness of the layer 3 ranges from 50 feet to 2,400 feet, and the thicker layers are generally around this area, and as you go down to south in the Tulare Basin. And layer 4, which represents the bottom of continental deposits, is basically based on Page 1974, and then DWR's 1968, Bulletin 74.8, and also Pierce 1985 in Sacramento Valley, and also Williamson 1989 in the San Joaquin Valley. The thicknesses are ranging all the way from 50 feet to 4,500 feet. And as you can see, as we go down to south of San Joaquin Valley and all the way to Tulare Basin, it goes very deep and it goes all the way to 4,500 feet thick. Aquifer parameters, Linda is going to talk about it. I'm running out of time. Basically, we used, Linda and Tim used texture analysis to analyze well logs and boron logs from DWR and USGS. They come up with a power law averaging equation to define aquifer parameters based on representative aquifer parameters for coarse and fine-grained materials. And there's a table over here shows basically the range of aquifer parameters that were defined both for SVSIM and C2VSim models. Pump spec and time series data. So the spatial distribution of the pumping in the model is dictated by basically by agricultural and urban demand and availability of the surface water supply. The model looks at how much is demand in there and how much surface water supply is available, and then the remaining demand is put on groundwater pumping. For vertical distribution, we use statistical analysis with help from SSPA and some other folks. We collect some information from DWR's OSCAR and calcium databases for top and bottom perforation information for the wells available in these databases. And we also use the old C2VSim pumping intervals as well to come up with top and bottom perforation information for the model for the whole Central Valley. And the time series data basically, again, is dictated by the model based on ag demand and surface water supply. Another information that's also represented in the model is the groundwater substitution transfer that's happening in the Sacramento Valley. Basically, we are all the 32 districts and 610 wells that participate in this program are represented in the model, and the information came from DWR and Yuba County Water Agency as well. So a couple more other simulation input files. The boundary conditions, basically the model has no boundary flow boundary conditions throughout the model area. The small watersheds basically dictates the boundary flow in the, at the model edges. The initial conditions, we used and collected information from 1973 groundwater levels. We brought that information together. We used some statistical analysis to come up with initial conditions, but the lack of information on the well construction information was a big challenge for us to be able to define a spatial distribution and also a vertical distribution of the initial heads in the model. And the model represents the unsaturated zone in two zones, and so far we are using the parameters from the old C2VSim model to represent the unsaturated zone in the model. So this is all I have, and if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer your questions.